Okay, people, please take your seats. It's a time for the first work package, which is going to be presented by Cayola from Eurecat.
Sí, vale. Vale, vale. Yeah, shall I start? Okay, so hello everyone. I think this is the first presentation after the, let's say, the general session, right? So we'll start by work package 1, as we should. And this work package is on hands-on restoration of coastal ecosystem and the upscaling potential of these restoration actions that we should be doing during the project in the different pilots, right? So yeah, well, I'm a researcher at Eurecat. Eurecat, it's the technology center of Catalonia. My background is aquatic ecology, so I'm an ecologist. And let me say that I'm also connected to the Climate Resilience Center, which is a new center that was created this year in June and is associated to Eurecat, but with other partners. Okay. So I will start by explaining what's in the proposal, just to refresh all of you what we said that we would be doing during the project, and then I will put on the table, let's say, some aspects, some cut crossing aspects that should be important to all the pilots, and I will give examples of what we intend to do in the Ebro Delta pilot, and hopefully that we can discuss. I don't know if we'll have time to do this because we're a little bit out schedule, but I think we'll have some time to have a discussion and also some ideas and exchange of ideas. So the objectives of this work package is to identify the most, well, it's mainly a technical work package, right? So they identify the most suitable technical solutions to restore coastal ecosystem. Then to implement these solutions in the pilots. As you remember, the call stressed this very much, that a big part of the budgets should go to hands-on restoration. Then we should be able to create a system or to adapt already existing systems to evaluate the performance of these restoration actions regarding two targets: ecosystem services and biodiversity. And then we should be able to define an innovative monitoring framework which will provide the basis to both to upscale and outscale the experiences that of restoration that we shall implement in our project. So to do this, we defined a number of tasks, 4 to be exactly, within this work package. And the first one is to analyze the performance of already existing coastal restoration. So we should somehow identify the technical barriers, so the difficulties that other people that did some kind of coastal restoration that they found, but also some good practices and successful cases, which would be the enablers. And then, based on this, we should implement the hands-on restoration in the pilots. Okay. We should monitor biodiversity and ecosystem services. And this would be the third task. And then we should somehow to make some kind of prospection of other sites beyond the pilot sites, in which the restoration actions that we are analyzing in our pilots could be exported. Let's go further deep into each task. So in task 1, the first thing that we have to do is a stock taking of the previous experiences, and this should be done with literature review mainly. Every type of literature, both scientific but also gray literature, etc., technical reports, whatever we can find, and we should pay special attention to the technical aspects, and bear in mind that the ecosystem services and biodiversity metrics if they used to evaluate the success of such restoration actions, right? Then we should produce a global database with this compilation of information that we did in the first step, and this global database should be accessible through the RESTcoast website, and also through the EU Knowledge Center for Biodiversity. This database, I think, well, I'm quite sure that will be very necessary for other work packages, such as the work package, well, mainly the 2, 3, and 5, right? Because it's a stock taking of previous experiences of coastal restoration. And then we should go back to the database and refine it. And for instance, if something is not clear, or if there is some information missing, we should go back to the authors of these reports, whatever, and try to fill the gaps that we identify in the database. And finally, we should perform a global analysis, so to evaluate the effects of these techniques used in the different restorations, and bearing in mind our targets, which are ecosystem services and biodiversity. So, in task 2, which is where we should implement the hands-on restoration in the pilots. So first, we should establish what Agustin already told us this morning, which are the core plats, the coastal restoration platforms. And to do this, we should identify, contact, and bring on board all relevant stakeholders for each pilot. So the pilot leaders here, of course, have a very important role to play. Then we shall co-design the upscaling of hands-on restoration actions based on this common framework. And finally, to produce a technical report on the barriers and enablers, like I told you before. So the barriers, the difficulties that we found, but also the good practices and the successful cases that will assure us that the restoration actions that we'll do, that they will be useful, again, for ecosystem services delivery and for biodiversity enhancement or protection, right? Then moving on to task 3, which is the monitoring the biodiversity and ecosystem services. And we are thinking about develop or adapt, well, develop if they are new and adapt if they exist already, metrics to that allow us to analyze the performance of the restoration, right? And this should be done at each pilot. And for this is very important that database that we created already in the task 1, where we took stock of the other experiences and also of monitoring and the metrics that they perhaps use there. And then finally we should prepare a common framework to assess these biodiversity and ecosystem services based on these created metrics. Okay, there is an important thing here because this is an opportunity to move towards a next generation of assessment metrics. I mean, we could, for instance, this is not applicable to all the cases, but we could use metrics already used under the Water Framework Directive to see if a certain restoration action will be useful to increase water quality, for instance. This would be an ecosystem service of a determined restoration. But this is we have an opportunity to move on and use and produce more efficient, higher cost benefit techniques, ways to measure these performances regarding ecosystem services and biodiversity. And if these methods, these new methods, are more efficient and cheaper, then we can increase spatial and temporal coverage. For instance, if we use Sentinel information, drones, eDNA techniques, etc. So I think this is a good opportunity, and this task I consider that it's a very challenging but very interesting task within the work package 1. The colleagues from INRAE are the leaders of this task. And finally, we should catalog and produce some global guidelines for coastal restoration that will be useful both for upscaling but also to do the outscaling. for the upscaling, let's say, to go from small restoration actions to big restoration actions within the pilots, but then also insights beyond the pilots. And this is for this reason also the 9 pilots that we have, both the core and the fellow pilots, are somehow representative of different typologies of coasts, which mean that if we know which kind of restoration techniques are useful to increase ecosystem services delivery or to enhance the protection of biodiversity, so we can export these restoration actions out of the pilots. But this will be on paper, okay? And for this is very important, the core plats, because we want to do this under, let's say, a bottom-up approach, taking it into account the opinions of all the relevant stakeholders that we said in a previous task that we should identify and bring on board in this work package. So this work package already started from months 1 to months 48, almost until the end of the project, and we should produce a number of milestones and deliverables, and the first, sorry. Oops. Sorry about that. And the first one, we should produce it at month 6. So I will contact every one of you because we should get to work, right? The first one is the data gathering of the previous restoration actions that we should take stock based on literature, etc. And then I mean it makes no sense to go through each one of each, but it's more or less like this, okay? And I mean, almost everyone, well, not everyone, but more than 60% of the partners will contribute to this work package. So I think it's 24 out of 38, right? Okay, so this is more or less what our proposal says and what we said, we promise that we will do. Now, let me, like I said, let me use the case of the Ebro Delta to put on the table some cross-cutting aspects that we can discuss after the presentation, which is what really means ecosystem restoration. And let me say, it's not only semantics. Let's see, and also this is connected, if you want, with the active versus passive kinds of restoration. Let's talk a little bit about that, putting the Ebro Delta as an example. The importance of the multifunctionality of the nature-based solutions. This is also an aspect that should be addressed in our project. And then the importance of the core plats for the development, and how do we think that we can do this in the Ebro Delta and to, let's say, and inspire or bring to the discussion how can we do this. So the first thing is that I think we should have an holistic perspective of ecosystem restoration, and perhaps we should not think only in ecosystem restoration to restore a certain place. Sometimes restore ecosystem processes, it's sometimes more important than to restore the area itself. We cannot do this every time. There is a number of aspects that we should be that should be covered in order to do this. Let me tell you a little bit about the Ebro Delta. It's the Ebro Basin. It's not very highly populated, 2.7 million people. But from the administrative point of view, it's not an easy basin to manage, because there are 9 regional governments that somehow have competences to manage the river flow. And river flow is very important for the Delta, and I will explain you why. It's a very regulated basin. We have almost 200 dams and a huge irrigated area, right? Of almost 800,000 hectares of irrigation, and more than 7,000 cubic hectometers of water consuming. More than 90% of this water consuming is for agriculture within all the basin, right? So it's a very regulated basin, and not all the water that should arrive to the mouth arrives, because most of the water is retained upriver. This morning Vicente already told about the different ecosystem types that we can find in the Delta, but also in the river, so I will not go further on this. But let me tell you a little bit about the lower stretch of the Ebro, let's say the last 120 kilometers. The 2 main dams that regulate the river in the lower stretch are these 2, the Mequinensa and the Ribarroja. There is another one, a small one, but actually it's so much colmated that it functions like a river, and its function is, it's not like a dam anymore. So, like a reservoir, I would say. So this means that since the construction of these dams, like you see, the river flow has decreased greatly. Before the construction of these 2 dams, the flow in the last stretch, in the lower stretch of the Ebro, used to be 600 cubic meters per second as a mean value, and now we have half of this quantity. We have a river flow of 300 cubic meters per second, right? But the dams not only retain and control water, but also sediment. You people that came yesterday to the Delta, we stressed very much this thing of the sediment deficit that we have in the Delta, because they are retained mainly in these 2 large dams. So just to have an idea, and someone asked me about the number of the sediment load before the construction of these dams. Well, was approximately 30 million tons per year, and now we have less than 1% of this sediment load arriving to the delta, which is the, let's say, the construction material of the delta. It's the fluvial sediments, right? And this is after the 60s when they begin the construction of these dams. So it's very clear. About the delta plain, which has 32,000 hectares, and around 70% of this surface is dedicated to rice farming. You saw yesterday, almost everything is rice fields, paddy fields, right? And about 25% of the delta plain are protected areas, which are mainly the coastal lagoons and the spit, both the north and the south. Okay. But then again, although these are protected, there are different protection figures. I mean, it's a natural park, but it's also a Ramsar area. It's a reserve of the biosphere, not only the delta, but the whole lower stretch of the Ebro. But these ecosystems, these natural ecosystems, are very far from being pristine. Like I told you yesterday, these lagoons are brackish water now, but they are artificially brackish water because the inputs of fresh water, which is artificial, and it's because of the rice cultivation, right? Otherwise, these lagoons would be saltwater, and this is important when we are developing. This is important to bear in mind when we are developing the metrics to assess the restoration, if the restoration is going to affect any of these systems. Because our target in this case should not be the pristine condition, but the condition that we have now. Because going back, at least now, would not be possible, right? And I think that in other pilots, this should be also very alike. But again, open for discussion. This is just an example of the relationship between the river flow and the fisheries. And the fisheries, let's say, if we think about fisheries as food provisioning, we are talking about an ecosystem service of the river flow. And we saw that the catches of these 4 species decreased from 66 to 2006 when we did this analysis. We made a model, and the main variable explaining this decrease in catches was the river flow. Not the river flow of the same year, but the river flow of the previous year. And here you can, well, the model does quite well. This is observed versus expected. And so it is quite clear that the river flow, as an ecological, let's say, process that we should restore. We are not trying to restore a specific area in this case, but an ecological process that will provide us in this case, an ecosystem service that would be food provision, right? As an example. I told you before, we are interested in restoring the river flow, but both the liquid and the solid flow. Also to recover at least part of the sediments that are now trapped in the reservoirs. The delta. Here I have an elevation map of the delta. So as you see, it's very low. More than 50% of the delta plain is below 50 centimeters, and some of the places are already below sea level. And of course, we have the sea level rise problem, which is between 3 and 4 millimeters per year, and we should add to this the subsidence also, and we have also this map of subsidence that can go from 1 to 5 millimeters a year, depending on the spot. But in terms of average values, we are talking about between 3 and 4 millimeters a year of subsidence. That if we sum the 3 or 4 millimeters of sea level rise, we are talking about 6 to 8 millimeters per year of relative sea level rise. And of course, and we expect that, well, it's a possibility that this will be aggravated every year. So there is an inundation risk. These images are from a paper. I think it's from Jose, right? I think Jose is one of the authors of this paper, and this shows the inundation risk on under a climate change scenario, right? Let me say that it's difficult for this to happen because people will do something. This is in the case that people don't do anything. But I mean, people, well, they already are pumping water out of the system, and they will do it in the future if the oil price allows it. But there are also other actions that we should do, and I think we'll do it to avoid this. So this is just in the case that we don't do anything. But also the Ebro Delta morphology. Do you remember yesterday that we saw we were here in the morning, and we saw the lighthouse that was here, more or less. As I told you, this change of configuration of the delta, in this case, the main driver is natural, because it was a change in the of the river mouth, but then also the presence of the dams upriver and the sediment retention also contributes to this change in the configuration of of the delta. And what we are expecting in the future, if nothing, it's done. But here, to do something means to mobilize the sediment that nowadays don't arrive to the river mouth. This is not the only problem. The lack of sediments does not mean only that the delta will retreat, but also that we are losing elevation. And in this case, it's not a problem of inundation, but a problem of the salinization of the soil due to the low elevation. And we have a model for this, and we can arrive to a point where the salinity of the soil will be so high that the rice farming would not be possible anymore, because the rice plant is adapted to a certain degree of salinity, but it's not a saline species, it's a freshwater species. So if we pass a certain threshold of soil salinity, we will not be able to farm rice anymore in the delta. So we must somehow compensate this relative sea level rise, and the only way to do this is with sediment, right? So some potential solutions that we thought for our case, and let's see then how we can discuss and change ideas with the other pilots. So I think we have a fairly good diagnosis of the human-induced impacts, including climate change, and we also have knowledge on the ecosystem processes and functioning in the Ebro Delta. And so we proposed, in our case, to restore a very important ecological process, which is the river flow. Both the liquid river flow, which I show you, gives us many ecosystem services, but also the solid river flows that gives us other ecosystem services, and also it's beneficial for biodiversity issues, like, for instance, the control of invasive alien species. I will show you then. Of course, other types of nature-based solutions are needed, and Vicente already told them this morning, so I will not go further on this. How do we plan to do this? So we must mobilize sediments that are now trapped in the dams, and we should bypass them over the dams, right? And then use the force of the river, use the flow, use the river flow to transport these sediments 80 kilometers downriver until the mouth, until we are interested in having sand in the mouth, because the silt that arrives to the mouth, it's lost because it goes offshore. But if we can take advantage of this finer sediment arriving to the delta and to distribute this clay and silt into the delta plain using the irrigation canal network that we have, then we also would gain some accretion. So in a simplified way, we need the sand to prograde the delta, and we need the finer sediment to accrete. And we should be doing this using taking advantage of the canal network that we saw yesterday, right? The good news is that this was done before. Local farmers, before the construction of the dams, they were willing to pay an extra tax to the irrigation community, so they could, let's say, open the tap when there was this big flow, these big floods of the Ebro, and the water was brown, full of sediments, and they were willing to pay an extra tax because they knew that this water was full of sediments. it would arrive, this water with sediments would arrive to the rice fields, and then they distributed these sediments with animals back then. So this was done, and we know this is functional, and so we can do it again. The only problem is that we don't have sediments, so we have to bypass them, right? We have already done some numbers. We know which is the most suitable way to bypass these sediments, and we are thinking about this large-scale pilot trial of 100,000 tons of sediment that we should transport to the delta, right? And this is one of the restoration actions that we put it in the call that would show the commitment of the Spanish government, in this case, which is a partner of our consortium. So theoretically, we should be able to do this during the project, and of course monitor the effects of this kind of restoration. Again, I insist, in this case, the restoration of a process, not the restoration of an area itself, right? Well, we more or less fairly know this should be improved, of course, but we know the behavior of these sediments with different flows, so we know how these sediments would behave in the river, because one thing is to bypass the sediments, but then another thing is to transport these sediments until to the delta, and for this we should have higher flows, right? But we know the flows that we would need, and we know how much time a grain of sand would take to travel 80 kilometers. So in a simplified way, it is more or less like this. We also know the behavior of these fine sediments in the Ebro Delta Canal network, right? So we know more or less how what we are expecting if we get this amount of sediments, and also the flow. And finally, let me tell you about the importance of the multifunctionality of these nature-based solutions, because in some meeting someone asked me, look, and but instead of doing this bypass to the river and then to let the river transport the sediments, why can't we think on having a pipe directly to the delta, because this way we could nourish the stretch of the delta coast that we wanted? Well, because it is important that the flows, both the liquid and the solid, it's important not only for the delta but also for the river and for other aspects. And if we did the thing like for instance, leading the pipe until the delta, this would not be a nature-based solution anymore. What we were talking about this morning, right? So let me explain you briefly the changes in the Ebro River. Before the dams, we had a river full of sediments, and for this reason, the phytoplankton and the macrophytes, the primary producers, were very low, right? But then, with the construction of the dams, we had a decrease in the flows, both the liquid and the solids, and we had a low water quality, mostly because of the nutrients, phosphorus and nitrogen. And for this reason, we had low sediments, but high amounts of phytoplankton. And for this reason, we had low abundance of macrophytes because let's say the light could not penetrate to the bottom of the river. Not because of the sediments in its, let's say, pristine condition, but because it was a eutrophic river, right? And then in the middle 90s, there was an increase in water quality due to better water treatment, but also because of the reduction of phosphates in the home, how do you say, the detergents, right? Yeah, in the soap. So we had a drop in the phosphorus. So we had a drop also in the phytoplankton, but we had an increase, a very high increase in the macrophytes. So we had an ecosystem shift here in the river, because we have, and these are the present conditions, we have a very transparent water, which it could seem that it is very good, but if we compare with the present conditions, it's very far from what we should have the river nowadays. And with this macrophyte explosion, we had problems with, for instance, some invasive species. This one is the black fly, which bites, and the number of people going to the doctor because of these bites was amazing. Right? So we have transparent water, lots of macrophytes, but it is very far from the pristine conditions. So what we saw is that if we have river flows of a certain magnitude, we can get rid of these macrophytes. And getting rid of these macrophytes, we can get rid of these invasive species. So that's another ecosystem service, in this case in the river, not in the coast. But that's why the importance of the multifunctionality of these nature-based solutions, of restoring an ecological process like the flow, and why it is important that we do it this way, not the other way around, right? Another thing also that we saw is that these are the probability of having a fish community dominated by invasive species, and if we want to have at least co-dominance of native species regarding to invasive species, which is the present conditions, we should have at least, well, this is a log axis, but it's more or less 0.4 meters per second, which corresponds to a certain river flow. And we have this river flow also counted with habitat modeling. So another ecosystem service given us by the river flow if we can restore it. Not only important for the coast, but important also for the riverine ecosystem, right? And so finally, I told you at the beginning of the talk about the importance of these core plats to make this, let's say, co-development exercise, bring on board all the relevant stakeholders for pilot. How do we think that we can do this in the Ebro case? So, in the Ebro, we have this commission, the Commission for the Sustainability of the Ebro, which is a participation forum, and in this forum it participates the governments, also sectoral representatives like agriculture, the fishermen, tourism organizations, etc., NGOs, research institutions and universities, civil society in general. Some functions of this commission for the sustainability of the Ebro is the follow-up and evaluation of sustainability-related projects, for instance, and reporting on the lower Ebro environmental flows proposals. So what we think, and this it's a little bit, let's say, slow, this commission. This commission started to work by 2006 or 2007, and now it's not very active. We think this is a good opportunity to reactivate this commission, and let's say to make this commission like we want the core plat of the Ebro to be in the project, but also to adapt to some of their dynamics, right? Another instrument that we have is the Ebro Delta Living Lab, where we will co-develop an Ebro Delta infrastructure, green infrastructure plan. Actually, it's a project that is led by EURECAT, by us, by my colleague Neil, that is sitting back there. So this is another instrument that perhaps we can use, or we can link somehow to this Commission of Sustainability and transform this into our core plat to make this exercise of bringing on board all stakeholders. And this is very important to do this development of these restoration actions, because otherwise, if we do it again with this top-down approach that some, well, I don't know, researchers or governments say to the people, so you have option A, B, and C, now choose. No, it's better to let's go develop the possible solutions, of course, based on knowledge, based on data, and then we decide among all of us which would be the most suitable one to be applicable in each pilot site. So this is our vision. This is how we see it. This is how we are trying, how we will try to do this. But yeah, I mean, lots of questions. We need help from everyone, and now it's open for discussion. Agustin, I don't know if we still have too much time to make this discussion, perhaps tomorrow. Yeah, anyway, thank you very much.
Okay, questions. Can first the people which is abroad do the questions? Otherwise, we will miss them. And now everyone is so quiet. Please, Johan, can you ask your question, please? Okay, Robert, can you ask your question, please? I don't know if they can hear me, because that's the other one. Yeah, they can hear me. Well, they're not here.
Sorry, I still have the hand up from the previous time. Sorry.
Okay, Johan. Just go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. First, the technical question. Can we get these presentations?
Yeah, of course.
Can we have these presentations?
Yeah, all presentations will be hung out on the web once it's live. Before it's live, I will hang it and share all the presentations in PDF with all the partners, because there's a lot of relevant information in them.
Second, you talk a lot about restoration, but it's not possible to restore. Given the process, I think we have to set targets that are plausible. For example, the rehabilitation, the possibility of
Well, because somehow you are restoring part of, but you are right, and I said that at the beginning of the talk. It depends on the target, and I gave you the example of the salinity of the coastal lagoons. So if our target would be to that all the lagoons in the Ebro Delta would be again would have a salinity of 36 per thousand, like they used to be, this would be possible in the present conditions. So, but if our target is that these lagoons are at least 15 or 20 parts per thousand, and why 15 or 20? Because in a previous study of a PhD student that I had some years ago, we saw that with at least 15 per thousand of salinity, we would get rid of most of the invasive species. So it's a question of targets. Of course, we are not talking about restoring the pristine conditions. I said that before. I mean, in most of the places, this is not possible. Not because technically will not be possible, because of the socioeconomic context of each region. And yeah, exactly. But at least we can restore part of the, in this case, of the processes, if we, bearing in mind that our target, it's another one. So let's get close as much as possible of the pristine conditions, but being aware that we will not be able to achieve the pristine conditions again.
Maybe it's a matter of the lingo. When I talk to them, I say to rehabilitate, not to restore.
Yeah. Now it's too late because the project is West Coast.
Okay, Robert, can you speak now?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly.
Good. I was two questions about rice. I've worked quite a bit in Bangladesh and India in West Bengal, and there they are breeding saline-resistant varieties, and they have an expectation that they will have new varieties in the next 10, 20 years that will be much more salt tolerant. So I wondered what was the implications of that for this study, if any. I'm just thinking out loud. And the second question is this, on the same broad topic. In COP26, they aspire to have rice that is grown essentially in dry land, I mean, to reduce methane emissions by 2030. And again, that's quite a big change for rice globally if that's pushed through. What again are the implications for the Ebro?
Yeah, well, these two aspects are being investigated right now. Both some varieties of rice, but I mean until now, well, you can get some varieties a little bit more tolerant to the salt, but to a little bit more of soil salinity, not too saline. I don't know. I don't see it really. I don't see it. On the other question, this is a scheme that it's also being tested in the Ebro Delta, which is the wet and drying scheme for rice cultivation. Well, there are some good results in some cases because it depends on the typology of the place, and again with the elevation, because if you have many days of a paddy that is dried, then automatically if this rice field is very let's say as a low elevation, it is very quickly the soil will become a little bit more salty, and then the production will decrease. So it is possible, but not everywhere. It is possible only if you have a minimum elevation. At least this is the experience of the trials that are being done in the Ebro Delta.
Thank you.
I was taking a calculation on that. So compensating 5 millimeters of subsidence every year with 10 square kilometer of land. Just remember, because you have 320
Mhm.
square kilometers, it's a little bit less.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came, and if I make calculations correct, using also your square meter numbers, euros per square meter numbers,
Mm-hmm.
and assuming that you can transport 100 milligrams per liter as suspended sediment,
Mm-hmm.
that's already quite substantial, and 100 milligrams as suspended sediment, then I get, then you need 5 million euros per year, and you need 420 cubic meters per second to get it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Well,
a lot of water, it's not
if you take into account all the delta surface, yes, right. What?
I started with 10 square kilometers.
Yeah, but I mean we must make this. Let's say we must go with the bisturi, and go to the places that are still recoverable. In the case of rice fields, I think that in the natural environments, we should not let's say take this into account. It's not a big deal for the natural environments to get saltier, because in the pristine conditions they were already, and not all rice fields are with an elevation that we should act, right? So yeah, of course, if we take all the surface into account, it's one thing. If we go to the spots that we are interested in, perhaps it's, but perhaps it's not possible. I mean, and this.
That I have is that it seems to me to take a lot of fresh water to get sediment there. Takes a lot of fresh water to get sediment there.
Well, but this it's not necessary to be. We need pulsing events. We don't need a river flow that is constant throughout all the year, right? For instance, one of the we did an exercise, because there are many proposals of environmental flows, right? There are one proposal of the ministry that says that the environmental flow should be 120 cubic meters per second. Another one that says that it should be 200, and then there is a proposal from this commission that I told you before, that we shall, well, at least we'll try to become the core plot that gives the different proposals for different year types. If it's a rainy year, or it's a medium, or it's a dry year, right? And the flows vary between 180 cubic meters per second annual mean, right? In dry years, until 380. No, sorry, 40, 20. 420 cubic meters per second in rainy years, but this is the year average. But of course, then you must distribute your hydrogram through the months, and you should have I don't know, 5-6 days of a pulsing event, but then you can reduce the flow. So we don't need all the amount of water the whole year, just in some determinate situations and days, which are enough to transport the sediments 80 kilometers downriver, at least according to our calculations. But I mean, we could be wrong. But that's also the importance of this pilot trial, right? to see if it is if it can be useful or not. That's why we are not proposing to have a permanent system. We have this pilot trial and see what happens. We think it will be a good thing, but perhaps we're wrong.
Mark?
I have a question regarding the question that you asked at the beginning, what ecosystem restoration is, and for your case, because you showed that graph or that figure with the turbidity or the temperature going down and macrophytes going up and so. What we're suggesting, is that something that a river person thinking about restoring the river, for example, or river ecosystems, will think the same way about? Or if we come up, if you guys come up with a great suggestion for restoring the delta and the coastal area, will the river people be horrified, or will they kind of agree that having a more turbid system with lower sediment will be helpful?
I think there is a very wide consensus among the river people, with the Ebro people, that the river needs more water and more sediment. Actually, there was a big social mobilization in the early 2000s, even before, when the government wanted to make this water transfer from the Ebro to the south, and the people from the Ebro, there was a really big mobilization, and actually the people from there could stop this plan. So I think in this case we'll be all right. We have enough, well, more than enough social consensus that the river needs more water and also more sediment, because people living by the river, the problems that they have with the black fly, for instance, nowadays there are treatments that it's done with BTI. BTI, it's an organic compound, Bacillus thuringiensis, israelensis. It's a toxin that it's very selective for filtering organisms like the black fly larvae. If these treatments were not done almost every week or every 2 weeks during the summer, it would be just impossible to live by the river because of these invasive species, right? So and people, I think they are aware that if we get more flows, both liquid and solid, that we can solve somehow this problem of the macrophytes, which is the basis of having this dispersion of the black fly. So because the flows that we are talking about does not meet floods, the river will not come out of the course, let's say.
I think this is something that may not necessarily be applicable to some other systems.
Yeah.
Any other systems.
Right.
To consider, make sure that that's communicated properly.
Completely agree with that.
Still a big divide between what river geomorphologists, river ecologists want to achieve and what we want to achieve.
Yeah.
Well, there's plenty of people that, there are several experiments about sediment bypass and sediment flash floats in order to allow the sediment to go down. So at this point, I think that this is something that should be scalable in plenty of dams. Actually, one of the problems in the Dalai in Israel was actually close to this one. It's the effect of the dam in changing the environment. So at the end, if we find a way in which we can bypass this problem, not the sediment, also the problem of having a dam there by providing a continuity of water and sediment to the lower part of the river, that could be an option in order to be upscaled to other places. Actually, one of the problems that we are facing, it's when we are speaking with the people managing the river, it's that we fear that they see that if that works, it will have to be applied to much other dams. And if you have one dam and you need to do a sediment bypass of one dam and allow a sediment flash flow, a water flash flow of one dam, that's no big deal. But if you have 200, that becomes a problem. So I think we fear that some of the reticence or some of the, we want to check that before, it's because it's a lot of work after.
But what do you mean with flash floods?
With increasing the water volume, allowing the sediment to go down.
Well, but if you don't have sediments, if
Yeah,
it is,
yeah. Agustin.
I just wanted, first of all, maybe it's time to call it today, but this discussion reminds me of a point that we talked about in the proposal preparation. We were writing papers, etc. I'm not a biologist, so I have to read more than the authors. And I remember some very interesting papers, which reminds me, this discussion reminds me of, but what is the right restoration? We've been talking about how to do it, how to balance it, how to manage it, but what is the right restoration? And maybe, well, at least one of the topics we suggested for a common paper among ourselves, and maybe even with some colleagues from the other projects, is catching up on that. Based on our limited current experience, the catching up what is the right restoration? I like Lima. Also, we had in Mississippi Delta such a discussion on Burfoot, where the sediment is also gone.
of the what? Sorry.
The Burfoot in
Uh-huh.
Mississippi, that's the one that's sticking out
Yeah.
to the Mexican Gulf.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's switched to that's in imbalance now because sediment is upriver somewhere. And then our question was, what is the new size of a delta, sort of related to a new sediment supply, and that gives you a completely different sort of perspective, because probably also in this case it's impossible to maintain this 320 square kilometer delta on the long term.
Yeah, but then they are doing these river diversions in some levels of the delta exactly to do this, to derive sediments in these lobes.
Yeah, but still,
Yeah.
that's peanuts amount of sediments relative to what has been supplied in the centuries before.
Of course, if you take into account the whole area, the whole surface, of course, but you must act in those spots.
So what can you maintain sustainably
Yeah.
for long term? That's a question.
And that's the analysis that we should do, of course. Yeah.
Okay, we have a queue of people, so it's not going to be over soon, Agustin. I'm sorry. Xavier? Okay, Julia.
Yeah. I would say the answer is soon.
Yeah, actually,
Because our
That is, of course, a very relevant question, and I think we should immediately, right after this meeting, start organizing
Right.
done remotely, now that we know one another, to discuss those things. So I would be suggesting somebody right now that we cannot do anything, everything, let's say, top down. You also need to raise those concerns and organize things bottom up. So by all means, by all means. Thank you.
Laura.
Yeah, I just want to add something to the discussion that, I mean, it's maybe a bit of a question about the concepts, restoration, nature resolutions, flow and things like that, that maybe we need a kind of harmonization within the project because as there are differences in case studies, it is something also relevant maybe even it can be a little like philosophical, but to discuss from the beginning of the project. On the one hand, because we need to be as much accurate as possible to go to the literature and to go from publishing. And in this sense, for instance, when we did the past research about river restoration projects in Catalonia, we found that the most of the projects were using the word restoration, but the most of the projects were not restoring the ecosystem, but rehabilitating or even functions or even structure. So this is something that, on the one hand, will be interesting, and we were also I was also talking about it with some colleagues in the cocktail, to at least internally in the project to discuss and to set a little what which would be like the main tool to talk about it. And the other thing is like the communication potential or risk about some of the topics that we are handling in the project. We will have to communicate with policymakers, with local people, with different types of stakeholders in some like cutting edge topics that are we are all learning about. And so, as some of you have mentioned, this is also something that can be challenging, and maybe the colleagues from dissemination work package leaders will talk about it. But I think it will be interesting also when we have to talk about risks with policymakers, or when we have to talk about what means restoration to an investor or to an insurance company. I mean, it's something that it would be interesting to be like consensus, to be built over a consensus from the beginning into the project.
Thanks, Laura.
I agree.
Xavier was first.
It's regarding the target of restoration with disease.
Mhm.
I think the key aspect is multifunctionality. And when we say this, I think what is very important is analyzing the synergies and trade-offs between the different objectives, between the different services
Yep.
and
Yeah.
biodiversity facets. And because the objective is not so much to predefine a priori, and who would do this, predefine the status we want. So the most important likely is to characterize these trade-offs and synergies between actually different targets.
Yeah.
And then it will be the social groups, the
Mhm.
stakeholders, etc., defining what they want. Because there will be trade-offs. There will be trade-offs between the targets and so between the interest of different
Yeah.
stakeholder groups. And so from this, I think it's linked to what we said just before. If we want to do this, we have to analyze synergies and trade-offs for each pilot. This is one.
Mhm.
For Evo data, can we characterize from existing data, additional data?
Mhm.
Can we characterize these synergies and trade-offs for even taking into account the emissions of greenhouse gases, because at the end, the function corresponding to the service is the warming abatement potential you have. Warming potential is carbon sequestration minus
Emission.
the emission, taking into account the kind of greenhouse gases you have.
Mhm.
It's not the same for CO2, CH4, and N2O. So this is one example. But we have to do this in a systematic manner
Yeah.
for the different pilots.
Yeah.
And if we agree on this, second West Coast verifies that we have sufficient metrics for different ecosystem services,
Mhm.
for different pilots, then we will have a super database to do this analysis. And it will be more important, I think, to deliver this kind of message. Hey guys, this is the spectrum of possibilities and the options you have. If you do this, you will gain this ecosystem service, but you will lose on
Mhm.
others, or you have other options.
But don't you think that, for instance, the core plats will be the right forums to do this exercise that you say?
To implement, I agree, but here I think as a consortium, we need kind of top-down approach at some stage to say, do we agree on the different services, the different targets, the different facets we need information for to do the job. And then when we agree with this, then of course in each pilot site, we will use the core platform
But-
to be implemented.
But
We can enrich those criteria
Yeah.
and tailor them to each pilot site, but we need a common basis of knowledge
Exactly.
to distill them.
Exactly. Otherwise, I fear that in 1 or 2 years, we will discover that in one pilot, we have invested a lot in ecosystem service 1 to 3. In another pilot, it will be 3, 4, 5,
But-
etc. And it will be a mosaic of situations, and we will be in the high difficulty to gather this and to get a big picture.
But I would be more comfortable with the inputs of the people from the stakeholder engagement to do this in the right way. Otherwise, it's something like here, take the chocolate, but not too much. You know, because we are talking about co-development, the co-design, but if we come up with already some solutions that we thought that these are the only solutions that you can choose, and this can be somehow misunderstood by the stakeholders. So in one way we are saying that we are counting with the stakeholders to co-develop these restoration actions, for instance, and also the metrics to evaluate the performance of these restoration. And by the back, you are saying, well, but not too much. It's me, the only one that knows about this, so you only have this op. I mean,
Just one last comment from my side. It's I see your point. I would agree. Just my view is that it's interactive. It's,
Yeah, that's it.
We did define already a series of ecosystem services.
Right.
That is
Right.
one. So we have to take into account, and this is what I call the top-down approach, make sure we have the same understanding and we optimize the possibility of the right information at the different pilots for this. In parallel, I fully agree with you. We need to remain flexible. So we have missed, for sure, we have missed important ecosystem services. They will, those guys, they will identify this. And we need to be ready to enrich the list of targets.
Right.
Let me just add, you have those ecosystem services, at least the initial list, we converge upon in the preparation phase. They are high. You have that in the first presentation of today, and of course in the description of work.
Stefano?
Just a few comments, because I found this problem of vocabulary very, very important, because the vocabulary is changing in these years. a new wording. We spoke about ecological transition today. We changed the name as the Ministry of Environment, and now we have ecological transition more or less everywhere, also in Italy. So the wording is very significant to the things that we want to do. And the European Green Deal, what we heard about the European Green Deal, what we heard in Glasgow yesterday, the reforestation of 1 trillion trees to be planted. I'm not sure it is for much ecological, but however, I think that we have found really a new wording for us. We can be, in some sense, promotional of this culture. I believe the European Green Deal is something very important that we are changing our vocabulary. So if we can agree, I mean it's not, it's worth to discuss of these things here, because there is no rule, it's an opening. It's something very new that is in front of us. So that in our case, I believe that this ecological restoration is much more related, my impression, to ecosystem services, where also the activity of the humankind is included. So it's something that is not anymore to repair, it's not the remediation. In the United States understanding of the remediation of what has been done, we have just to correct the action of the man. We have it's more a co-evolution of the environment and the sustainability of the presence of the man in the environment. I mean, it's not philosophy. I guess it's something that is very related to our work, and also it could be a target of our project to set up, to clarify this vocabulary in order that we can use it in a more proper way, and it will be also instrumental for a new deal, a new Green Deal of the European Union. This is my idea.
Okay, thanks. And thanks everyone. I think that's the final statement for today. I have here a list of action points. We will be commenting that on last session on Friday. But please, if you feel that anything should be there, let me know. If not, we'll be seeing you all again tomorrow morning at 9 here at this meeting point. Okay? Bye, everyone.